the swastika. So my first question, Dr. Elst, is what does a swastika mean?
The swastika is a solar symbol. It refers to the daily cycle or annual cycle or much longer cycle of the heavenly bodies that you can see every night in the sky. So it shows a whirling movement. It need not be with 4 legs. There is a triskel version with 3 legs. This is a tetraskel, 4 legs. That's the swastika we usually know. There's also a version with 12 legs, the so-called black sun. So the number is not so important in itself. It is the whirling movement that is suggested, and that so therefore suggests the celestial movement that goes on all the time. Since it goes on all the time, it is also a symbol of eternity. And as such it is used widely, especially in India, by all the major sects, by the Jains, by the Buddhists, by the Brahmins. It is also used in China similarly. It is known to be used among the Native Americans, but also in ancient Greece, in ancient Troy, in the Baltic region. It's pretty much everywhere, though in specific regions more popular than in others. But so it's pretty universal.
Very interesting. And do we know how far back this goes?
Well, as far back as we can tell. In Harappa it already existed, for example. Like when Heinrich Schliemann dug up Troy, he found numerous swastikas in all kinds of forms on the floors, on the vases.
Very interesting. So swastika, is this a typically Indian symbol?
No, not at all. So it's quite popular in India. It already existed in China, but Buddhism especially emphasized it, made it very common in China. So in all the Hindu Buddhist countries it is very much there, but again it is also there among Native Americans. Though the Navajo tribe apparently has suspended its use during the Second World War, but many of them were in the army, and so they learned to see this as an enemy symbol. But generally, yes, they still also use it. And then in the Baltic, for example, the Finnish government has issued an object commemorating the Finnish resistance against the Soviet aggression during the Second World War, when they took the help of the Germans, in fact, to defend their country against the Soviet Union. And that symbol is a ring with a swastika on it. And that is not at all in commemoration of the collaboration with the Nazis. No, that is a local symbol. So in the Baltic countries it is very common even till today.
So one thing I don't understand is if this is a global symbol and not just an Indian one, and it reaches back so far in ancient history, then where did Hitler get it from?
Well, it already existed in Europe. He didn't have to get it from India. In ancient Greece it was present. He was a great lover of the Greek tradition. He was very much into visual arts, which is why he designed the famous swastika flag himself. If he had been allowed to become a student at the Fine Arts Academy of Vienna, of course history would have been different. But so even as a state leader, he remained very much interested in visual arts, and so it's in that context that he designed the very specific form of swastika that adorned the flag. Now he got it partly from Greece. One thing where you can see his love for Greece is the typical Nazi art. Nazi art and Stalinist art are very similar, very mediocre in a sense, glorifying the ordinary, dutiful life of ordinary people. However, the difference is that in Nazi art you have a lot of nakedness, which you don't have in Stalinist art. And so that is an example of the influence of Greece. Another country that influenced him, or a series of countries, was the Baltic. After the First World War, many German soldiers returning from the front couldn't find their place in civilian life very well, something like the Vietnam veterans in America. And so they formed these Freikorps militias that at that time happened to have a useful military role, namely to defend the Baltic states against the Soviet Union. So they did. They went there in 1919, 1920. They did their job. They ensured the independence of those countries, and then they returned home. Now, one thing they brought home with them was precisely the swastika that was very common in the Baltic countries. And it is precisely those soldiers who formed the mainstay of the party that was to become the Nazi party. So on that side too, Hitler was immersed in swastikas. And so those are the two main influences, ancient Greece and the modern Baltic. India was not involved, not at all. In fact, all the statements that Hitler ever made about India or the Hindus are negative. For example, when he met Subhash Chandra Bose during the Second World War, Bose, who wanted, of course, the independence of India, and who had been led to believe by the German foreign minister Joachim von Ribbentrop that Germany was sympathetic to this project, he was given a cold shower by Hitler, who told him, "You people don't need independence. You are well off, very well off as relatively inferior people. You enjoy the protection and the beneficial, the benign rule of the British, who are a superior race." So he didn't like India at all. Or for example, he was also anti-Brahmin, like many of the progressives in India nowadays. He made this comparison between the hereditary priesthood of many cultures, including the Hindu one, with the Catholic priesthood. Because the Catholic priesthood was celibate, it was always, every generation anew, it was recruited from the ordinary people. And so that, according to Hitler, was its strength, was what made it good, what put it in solidarity with the ordinary people, rather than pursuing its own separate class interests like the Brahmins did. But anyway, whatever he said about India was negative. And he didn't think that the swastika came from India. On the contrary, he explicitly thought that the swastika was present in India thanks to the Aryan invasion. He articulated the Aryan invasion theory himself when he said that the most Indians, especially the upper castes, were a mixture, partly aboriginal, partly Aryan invader. And so it was these Aryan invaders, in his opinion, who had brought the swastika from Europe. So he very much saw it as a European, not at all as an Indian symbol.
But he wasn't behind that. The Aryan invasion concept or theory was, predating him at least a century, right?
Yeah, of course he didn't invent it. Neither did the British colonialists invent it, as many people in India seem to think. It was just a scholarly theory. It was relatively innocent politically in its origins. But then when politicians saw how they could use it, they did. And so ultimately it became the most politicized theory in the humanities worldwide.
So getting back to the symbol, it's always drawn up, at least for the Nazis, in a certain way. And the branches kind of go out in a certain direction. Is there a correct direction?
Right, let me add first something to the last question. The word swastika was not used by the Germans. They called it Hakenkreuz, which is a physical description of a cross, Kreuz, which was like a cloth hanger, Haken. And so this hooked cross. And so the word swastika, being Indian, was not liked by Hitler at all. You know, the Allies used it to describe what the Germans were doing, but the Germans themselves didn't use the word. So again, they distanced themselves from India also by the use of the word. Okay, now this question. The direction can be either way, because that simply depends on from which angle you look at the celestial cycles. If you look from the northern hemisphere, you get a clockwise direction, which incidentally is where the direction of the clock comes from. And in the southern hemisphere it will be counterclockwise, but it's the same movement. So there is really no fundamental difference between the two directions in this respect. And indeed in Asia you find both forms of swastika. And it's also not true that the one is Hindu and the other is Buddhist, or that the two have different names, like swastika and Swastika. That's something that I see being claimed. That's not correct. So both directions of the swastika are just fine. It's merely, if you look from the northern hemisphere, it's the reverse from the southern hemisphere. In certain contexts you could make a difference. For example, the circling movement around an object of worship, as pilgrims do. There you usually try to have your right hand towards the object being worshipped. Like the original turning around the Kaaba in Mecca before Muhammad was pradakshina, as Hindus call it. Pradakshina meaning going forward with the right hand side in focus. So they would have their right hand towards the Kaaba. Now Muhammad reversed that direction simply to emphasize that he was not doing the same thing as the pagans did before him, and to emphasize also that it was not sun worship, that people were not imitating the movement of the planets around the sun as seen here from the northern hemisphere, that you see this was something arbitrary ordained by Allah and not linked to the planetary motions. So in that case you could say there is a difference, a right and a wrong. In the case of the swastika, that is not material. So the swastika can be either way. That is not what is wrong with the Nazi swastika.
So, you know, we live in a world of symbols, and some symbols are, you know, sensitive and some are supposedly not, right? So if somebody wears a t-shirt with a cross on it, a Christian cross, that's culturally acceptable. If they even wear a t-shirt these days with the communist hammer and sickle, as I've seen many people do, that's okay and even cool, although there's a bloody history there. But if they wear a t-shirt with the swastika on it, I think people would be very offended and consider that a symbol of hate, even though it's a historical, spiritual symbol. So I guess the question is it wrong to use this symbol today?
I'll give you a straight answer. No, it is not wrong to use it today. Though perhaps the very specific form that the swastika took in a Nazi context had better be avoided. You see, it has wrong connotations and they will last for another generation or even more. So that perhaps you can avoid. The swastika in general, no. You see, there is a big difference. The Nazi swastika has a very specific shape. So let's go into that again. It is a black swastika on a white and red field. Now the swastika being a solar symbol, being a symbol of the stars cycling around, or the sun apparently turning around the earth every day. As a solar symbol, it's supposed to have a solar color, so it should be yellow or red or orange, but not black. It's only in black and white print that it is acceptable to make it black. But if you have a choice, and here you have, as the field is red, so if you can paint red, then the swastika itself should be red.
Question about the red. You had kind of mentioned Stalin earlier, and a lot of people don't know that Nazi stands for National Socialist. Does the red have something to do with socialism and communism or Marxism?
Yes, of course. Yeah, of course. Unlike in America, where red is the color of the Republicans, in the rest of the world, red is the color of socialism. And so Hitler too was a committed socialist. I don't know, however, if that is the reason why there's red in this flag. You see, that may have been an afterthought, some extra meaning, but the color scheme, black, red and white, is age old. You find it, of course, in India as the symbol colors of a cosmic scheme called Triguna, the three qualities. So they are sattva, which is the transparent, the truthful, and it has a symbol color white. Red is the passionate, the energetic, the dynamic, the partisan, and it has the symbol color red, well, as I said. So that's called rajas. And the third one is called tamas, which means darkness, and its symbol color is black. It signifies inertia, heaviness. And so the idea is that everything in the cosmos is a combination of those three, with the one element more significant than the other in different types of objects, but at any rate all of them are a combination of those three. It is very similar to the Chinese scheme of yin and yang, where you have two elements. So here you have three, that's a different kind of dynamic, but it's the same type. So it is a cosmology. Now that cosmology you find throughout the Indo-European world, perhaps also beyond, because those lines are not very clearly drawn. But anyway, you do find it in the Germanic tradition also. In the Edda, the sacred book of the Germanic people, there is a story of three children born who represent the three strata of society, with the nobility being white-haired, the ordinary freemen being red-haired, and the serfs being black-haired. Now in Scandinavia you had a choice of these hair colors. In most of the world everybody is simply black-haired. But anyway, you see that physical aspect is not so important. It is a representative of this idea that the superior is white, the inferior is black, and the in-between is red. So that is part of the symbolism of the swastika as Hitler conceived it. He was stepping in a tradition where these colors also already had meaning. And so he's applying that, but he's applying it wrongly. You see, his color scheme is that the center is black and the periphery is red. It should be the reverse. So the swastika itself as a solar symbol should be red and the background should be black, not the other way around. So this way it becomes a negative symbol, it becomes a symbol of darkness. Then there's a second thing wrong with it. It is standing on one angle, uncomfortably. You see, as a symbol of eternity, the swastika is supposed to be square, to be standing on both its feet, so to speak. And in the case of the Nazi swastika, it was standing on one angle, which is an uncomfortable position, and perhaps explains why the Nazi Empire, which was supposed to last 1,000 years, lasted only for 12, because it's very uncomfortable to keep it up to stand on one angle like that.
That's an interesting theory. I've never heard that. So if they got the symbol right, they would have lasted longer?
Well, I don't think symbols are that important.
Yeah.
But it just so happens that the wrongness of the symbol corresponds pretty well with what was wrong and what went wrong with the Nazi Empire.
Very interesting. Well, thank you, Dr. Elst, so much, and hopefully people watch this to learn more about the swastika symbol. Thank you.